Why I do not oppose whether or not Nibiru exists, I'm only dealing with facts as presented, and I don't show my hand sometimes. For Misty. Request and or statements. Do you honestly believe there is not an extremely low luminous planet, dwarf, failed star, etc., entering or already deep in our solar system? Some and or a very few videos are truly scary, because if there is a Nibiru, then shit is going to be unbelievably bad here on Earth. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for the video. Good explanation. Got to admit, almost all Nibiru vids are trash or just plain something that is obviously not Nibiru. Now, I'm going to be putting some things in this video, hopefully without somebody coming along with a freaking air horn to interrupt me, to explain constraints. Now, this is going to be a trigger warning. Some people out there believe truly, I'm going to cover this, that the education system, NASA, mathematics, physics, voltmeters, whatever, are all there to limit you. It's very triggering because there's no limits. Anything is possible. Now, I'm not saying this to the person asking this question. I'm going to get to this question because this is a rational, sane person asking a question. I'm going to deal with the assertions people make that they don't actually approach here. No, not everything is possible. That's all there is to it. Killjoy mode. There are certain constraints and limits in time-space. We've found them because we've tried to exceed them and found out that there's either a curve that tells us where the limit probably is, light speed, or we figured out actually what really makes the Earth orbit the Sun. And it's consistent, whether we like it or not, and it applies to all the other physical objects orbiting the Sun. Not wanting to accept that response. If someone's doing that while watching this, stop watching, because you're not going to be happy. The speed of light in a vacuum, or in space, is around 186 million miles per second. That's a large speed, and we use a number of meters it moves, because we can use that for figuring out wavelengths for light, of course. It's a nicer, rounder number. And the time it takes for the sun's light to reach planets in our solar system is anywhere from 3 minutes to Mercury, because it's 3 light minutes away from the sun. And 5.3 hours for light to hit Pluto. And it's 3.67 billion miles from the sun. Now, this is based on the center of the sun distance to the center of Pluto, and it's averaged. But it's 5 hours for a signal to get from the sun to Pluto. Alright? That's at light speed. Alright? Okay. It takes almost 250 years for it to go around the sun. It's moving very fast at this point. You might want to figure out how fast that's going. You'll be surprised how unimpressive it is in some ways. The solar wind, that's the energy from the sun in a vacuum, that's boiling off of the equivalent to nuclear warhead after nuclear warhead going off, is around 1,600 miles an hour. That doesn't sound impressive. That's relative to something here. There are other ways of interpreting it that's much bigger numbers. Or not. I mean, it could be just a math error. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. All of the things I'm going to be saying now that have numbers in them will or will not have errors. I've deliberately not checked them all. I'm checking how many times I can do the equation from the start and see how many times I make a mistake. So you might want to look all these up. I'll include the answers below. You can go look them up, but you can see how many times I made a mistake. The reason I'm doing this is me slamming through all of these and seeing how many mistakes I can make, but seeing how consistent things are due to the limits of time-space. Reality. Reality sets these limits, not science, not your math book, not your teacher, not some authority figure, not some government. There are certain mechanical limits in time-space. And I have kind of a joke about why people shouldn't try to exceed these, but here we go. Humans have been a maximum of almost 250,000 miles from the surface of the Earth. That's around 10 times its circumference. Yeah, that's the maximum distance that we've ever traveled, human beings. The fastest manned vehicle, human beings in it, relative to the Earth, as you might imagine it's a similar thing, was the 1969 Apollo 10 command module called Charlie Brown. And it was moving only around, well, I'm going to round it up to 25,000 miles an hour. Yeah. Okay. versus the, this is a huge ass number, almost 160,000 miles an hour for 1974's Helios probe, or spacecraft. So it would take 30 months for us to visit Pluto. Now see also the Great Comet of 1843, these are naturally occurring objects in this case, was at around 1,200 miles per hour. Okay, that's a comet with a long, literally astronomical units long tail to it. The maximum speed of an object that orbits a sun at a certain radius is based on its escape velocity. There's a kind of a clue to that. It's maxed out at, for any object that would be considered within the orbit of Pluto, of being, here's the number, 1.3 million miles per hour before it escapes, because its escape velocity. If it's going faster than that, no object is able to go faster than that without escaping the solar system, never to return. And that's for small objects, small bodies. A comet emerging from around the sun will have an escape velocity of around that. It's a little bit over that. That's the escape velocity. So an orbit can be no faster than that, because an orbit would imply that it's not escape velocity, and it can at all, in any way, shape, or form, get within the solar system at all. This is an extreme example. Comets are the worst case scenario for extreme speed. It can happen without you knowing it. Oh no, we have to worry about it happening any day, kind of thing. Those are comets. They're the size of a truck, something like that. Now, what is this based on? Well, okay, here we go. The centripetal force required to keep a planet in an orbit around any sun or any star has to oppose the gravitational force exerted by that star. So for the sun, there's certain limits because the sun is a certain mass and exerts a certain amount of gravity. It will orbit the sun with a kinetic energy equal to half the energy needed to escape the sun, because it's balanced out at 50-50. Or it would escape or be in an unstable orbit or achieve a different orbit. Unless an object is orbiting the sun for, only one orbit, it's going to have to be in a stable orbit, or at least somewhat stable. So that limits what the objects can move at and their interactions. Now we're going to get to the next part. So any orbiting object, any orbiting solar system bound object cannot impact the Earth, because that's one of the scenarios for Nibiru, not just a drive-by hit, an impact. We're going to start with that. At any speed over 185,000 miles per hour, if it was something large. And that's, well, actually not really. But so an object approaching from a Pluto distance, because the claim is it's coming into the solar system from outside of it, and it's bigger than a bread box, so we can detect it. I mean that the way it sounds. It would take 27 months. It wouldn't be sudden. If it took less time than that, it would only do one in and out orbit and leave, because it would slingshot off some other distance and never come back. It would be a hyperbolic orbit, which isn't really an orbit. It's an unbound orbit. So except for the idea of some drive-by planet or object, it's going to take 27 months or longer for something to move into our solar system for us to see. But the claim is, and this is the claim, over and over again about Nibiru, the meme, not Nibiru the object, which I'm going to get to, is that it's orbiting, that it comes by every X number of thousand years. This is a mistake that was made by these doomsdayers, the ones who are lying mostly, because the claim restricts its speed and restricts its maximum speed. An Earth-sized object would be limited about the same way the Earth is, at about 66,000 miles an hour. It would take 6 years to get from Pluto to Earth. All right, it wouldn't be bebopping around the sun, appearing just off axis from the sun, on the opposite side of the sun even, and be a threat, because that would represent a stabilized orbit that is nowhere near us. You can't claim you're seeing Nibiru for 2 decades and have it be anything other than a simple stable orbit of an object. Maybe it's a nemesis. Maybe it literally is on the opposite side of the sun, but we've already checked around the sun. And if it's Earth size, because of its physical size, it would take 6 years to travel from Pluto's orbit in. Now we're going to get to the it can't be seen thing. We have radar equipment in orbit that can detect something the size of a Buick all the way out to Jupiter. That's not the optical thing, that's radar. A star that is burned out, a brown dwarf, or a low luminosity, almost black object would still reflect radar. You have to invent a magical universe version of a planet that doesn't reflect radar in order for this not to be detectable. The whole point of these assertions made by Nibiru video uploaders is that we can't see it or detect it, but somehow you can detect it with a video camera if you're a special snowflake and deliberately buy the cheapest camera with the worst optics possible. Now we'll get on to the next one as everyone walks by and hopefully doesn't start making as much noise as possible. That will of course fail because I've hit the 10-minute mark and no one can resist themselves. So we'll wait for it. Waiting for it. Are they done? Okay. That was brought to you by way too much drinking and apparently marijuana. Next. So what we have here are limits that say anywhere from 30 months to 6 years to maybe 2 years of time delay in a space that we know for a fact that we can detect things with radar every year. But somehow all of the assertions that you're probably seeing in most, if not all of these videos, is it's not detectable or they're lying to us. The trouble is most of the equipment is monitored in raw mode from the Earth by everybody. There's no way to hide anything. That's the whole point of science. You don't trust somebody ever in science to analyze the data. You grab the raw data. Nobody is analyzing this and finding anything out there. Radar, optical, or anything. The only one making an assertion similar to this, and it's a very good one, and very, very similar one, so I'm going to include it in the little video as someone walks extremely slowly by, not trying to be creepy, is the following. Mike Brown, aka Pluto Killer, has decided to take on the Nibiru idea and make it real. So I'm asserting that everyone should go to petition.org and set up a petition, as everyone walks by trying to hear what I'm saying, to have the next detected object with an extremely eccentric orbit declared named Nibiru, just because it would be funny, and it would get rid of the problem, honestly, in my opinion. That object he's discussing, for these same reasons, would still be bound to an orbit, and in his case, the only reason it would work at all is it doesn't come near the Earth at all. It doesn't come near anything. It orbits out there, orbiting other objects. That's the closest anybody's come to anything like this. And I still think he's wrong because there's a couple of dozen other options besides a large planet. But remember, the assertion is still, and these are the assertions, this is the hypothesis that got presented in the first place, and people won't drop. It's the size of the Earth or bigger, so that limits it how large it is. It's somehow invisible to radar, optics, or everything, which doesn't make any sense because you can detect Pluto, and you can detect asteroids, and you can detect... That doesn't make sense. Or that it's a brown dwarf, which would still reflect radar, or it's the only thing left is someone calling it a black hole. Guess what? You can detect black holes too. So we are now at the point where every single trope about this is destroyed because all of the tropes cancel out the ability to detect it. They're invented for that purpose. Now, again, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning. I should have said at the beginning. I'm sure I did. I'm not saying that Nibiru doesn't exist. I'm saying that the proposal as is of Nibiru is unworkable because it relies on you ignoring mechanical laws of time-space, limitations, and physical constraints that say certain things are not possible. I want to believe everything's possible. We all do. But there are certain things that are not because they simply are not possible. They don't work. You can test this. And all of the assertions that are made by people who have discovered these things are right on the table for anyone to analyze and try to find a way to violate. We would love to violate all these things. We would love to have a spacecraft travel faster, for instance, or people be able to survive doing so instead of having to use a robot probe. The reason that I do these videos the way I do is that nobody bothers addressing these basics. Any of them. In fact, they avoid them like the plague because they know that they can't do anything about it. Now, I'm going to repeat Misty's request here. A low luminous planet or dwarf failed star or something of that nature, that would be an interesting idea. The trouble is that every single trope about it makes it on purpose towards unprovable, unfalsifiable, and unreal. Please send me a link to the videos you found that are most scary, the few that actually convince you this may be going on. I'd like to address those. But really, this is the basis to come from. Limits. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.